Yeah, whenever you're good, Kirk.
And then
I'm good whenever Rocco's ready.
Did you talk to Mike?
Working on this, and I'll get this thing up in a few.
All right, we are live.
Good evening, everybody. I want to welcome the Saugerties community to our virtual town hall to discuss our reopening. I want to thank the board members that are with us tonight. With us to help answer any questions that I'm unable to answer. We have Dr. Westinghouse, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, Dr. Kapler, who is our PPS Director, and Mr. Dan Ersick, who is our Director of Human Resources. So the format for tonight is there's a chat box that'll be put in. Mr. Ersick will read the question. I'll answer it. If I'm unable to answer it, one of the assistant superintendents or directors, if we still can't justify your answer, we don't get to all the questions, we can save the chat room, and then we can answer those questions and add them to our FAQ on our website. Once again, I want to thank everybody's participation. We started this process. We've had 12 meetings with our opening task force. We've done a couple surveys, and as you know, a lot of things have been changing from above us. The most important thing going forward is the safety of our students, putting a plan in place that moves us constantly forward, not having to take a step backwards. I know I put out that message today that our decision was to start the year to use our 100% remote plan that was drawn up, and then phase ourselves into a hybrid model. The goal is to create an environment that is not only academic safe, but also socially, emotionally safe for our students and our staff. I believe by giving us this time to train our staff, to put our protocols in place and practice our protocols, which are just as important as writing them out, will get us in a place that as we start transitioning to in-person education, I don't want to have to go backwards. My goal is for 100% of our students to be in our buildings. It was a very difficult decision as someone who's been in education for over 30 years. I know what it means to students and staff as we start getting closer to Labor Day and how much everybody wants to be back in school. I just want to make sure we're doing it in a way that's conducive to learning, both from an academic point of view, an emotional point of view, as well as a safety point of view. So with that, we're going to do everything we can tonight to answer as many questions. Once again, continue to submit questions. If we don't get to them, we'll put them on our frequently asked questions site, and you can always email the staff. Also, we're going to have another meeting. We were going to have one tomorrow night, but a couple parents had asked to have one during the day. So next Thursday, we'll do a Zoom again at 10 o'clock in the morning. And then next Thursday evening, there will be another one at 6:30 set up just like this. So with that, Mr. Ersick will read the questions as they come up, and we will do everything we can to answer those questions. I know this is a difficult conversation. I know nobody is happy with any of the decisions we've had to make, because I don't think there's a single person in public education that doesn't want our students back in school. But I will ask that the most important thing we do tonight is model respect and consideration for everybody. You know, there's people who feel the need that the best place for their child is at home, and I have just as many parents that have already contacted me this afternoon that would love the opportunity for their children to be back in school 5 days a week. But with that being said, as adults, when we model respect and caring for everybody, our students see that. So I think the most important thing we can do tonight is continue to answer questions and make a plan that safely and as soon as possible, all of our students are back in our care. So with that, as questions pop up, I will do my best to answer those.
All right, so our first question is from Mallory, who writes, who is going to provide daycare and support for young students whose parents need to work?
Well, thank you. As I was thinking about this decision and I was meeting with my cabinet, that is obviously one of the biggest concerns we all have is our children when they're not in school, they're not with their parents, supervision. we don't have the answers to that. We will be reaching out like we did in the spring to organizations in the area to find out what supports they have. And we will work with parents and help make those supports and those connections. We also do have support staff that will be in school, and our expectations, if we have parents that need those additional supports, they need to talk to our psychologists and social workers. I want to make sure we're making those connections as well.
Shannon Hartram writes, what does this mean for BOCES?
I was actually on a conference call yesterday with our Ulster County BOCES. My goal is to use this 5 weeks as a phase-in period. We were looking at how do we phase in our students with disabilities, how do we phase in our E&L students, how do we phase in our students that are K2, and how do we phase our students that go to BOCES or some of our out-of-district placements. So to me, that's a perfect opportunity to start that phasing in. So we have had that conversation with BOCES. As you know, our BOCES day is a Wednesday. So that is a consideration that is still on the table. And if we can make that work, even if it's a phase-in situation, I would love to make that happen.
Andrew writes, what will be done to help seventh graders when they transition back to when the transition back to school happens, since they have not been to the school yet?
Excellent, thank you, good question. I'm not sure if Ginger is on or not, but Ginger is putting a plan together for a way of doing very small group orientations, and we're also looking at virtual tours and virtual orientations for parents who are unable to come in. So we'll give you more information on that, but she was looking at the numbers, roughly 200 seventh graders coming in. But that is an excellent question, and that's something that, that Ginger, the 7th and 8th grade principal, has already started working on.
Shannon writes, what about those children who don't have home internet?
As you know, last time we put hotspots outside the building. Once we get the data, we have the survey back. One of the things we're going to do is reach out, and our IT department is looking at how feasible is this to put hotspots out in the community.
Stacy Fazano writes, my son is enrolled in the welding program at BOCES. How is this going to work?
Very similar to the person that asked previously. We're hoping, because it's such a hands-on, and we have not heard of any waivers regarding the hours for the CT licensing. So if there's a way that could start as being one of our transitional groups, bringing everybody back, we would like that to happen.
Lisa McCormick writes, will the teachers be teaching from their classrooms or from home?
Teachers will be teaching from their classroom.
Fred Carney writes, do you know when we meet to get Chromebooks again, like we did earlier?
Yes, we're looking at the last week in August.
Last week of August or first week of September, so that students will have their Chromebooks prior to the first day of school on September 8th.
Hmm.
Oops, daisies. Aaron Davis writes, thank you for making the difficult decision. I have not yet had time to review the new model. Could you briefly describe what we should anticipate, including what time the assignments will be made available, what platform, what real-time remote classes with teachers will be at the same time that the classes would regularly be? If not, will they be standing consistent times week to week? Thanks.
Okay, so the model we're going with is the original 100, if we went to a 100% remote. So we will continue our 6-day cycle, but as far as for parents to track it easier, on Monday, high school students will be synchronous, which means the exact same time as their normal schedule for periods 1 through 4. And then this will allow elementary K6 to be live or synchronous in the afternoon. On Tuesdays, the high school will be virtual in the morning, and the elementary will be virtual in the morning, and the secondary will be live in the afternoon for periods 5 through 8. The reason why that decision was made is because there was concern over classes meeting on top of each other, not being able to space things out. This also has an opportunity for the elementary to have live lessons in the morning and also live lessons in the afternoon. That'll be on rotation. Wednesday will be a day which will be 100% remote. That will allow time for teachers who may have to have small group learning with students. Some of our specials may need that time. We're also looking for teachers that ask for additional time, maybe an AP class who feels another Google Meets or another meeting may take place. So that's why that schedule is up. As far as homework assignments and flexibility, I believe the staff understands the situation with our students. The most important thing with anything as far as attendance, as far as assignments, as far as projects, is communication. Reach out to your classroom teacher, reach out to your building leader. Like I said, when we open up on September 8th, we will have all of our support staff. They will not have students in the building, so the expectation is they're meeting those parents. Even if it's virtually, they're meeting the needs of our students, both social and emotionally. And if it's resources we need to get from our community, they'll be being the liaison for those as well. So that's the model we're going with, and that's what it's going to look like. The reason for that is we wanted to make sure that when we transition back to in-person, their students are they're used to their teachers, and they're used to a more regular transition and a regular schedule.
Stephen Gentile writes, how will subjects such as PE, art, music, classes that don't mesh well in a virtual environment be supervised, administered?
Well, the reason why we wanted to go with more of a traditional schedule, even though it's going to be virtual, is so that those classes are embedded into our programming. I agree, for a lot of those classes, they're going to have to be very creative. But the reason why we wanted to keep the high school schedule the way it was, so whatever electives the students are in, they will maintain that 8-period day. And this will also allow the elementary, which will be going AM, PM, rotating, also an opportunity to make sure they're having a chance with their specials in their encore classes.
Barbara Boyce writes, when an in-person instruction begins, what provisions will be placed for social distancing on the buses?
Right now, the way that the CDC has it is a student every other seat with a mask. You can have more than one student in a seat if it's sibling. So based on our large buses, that's 22, which isn't, it obviously isn't close to max, but that's the provision, and that's what we're going to start with, hopefully October 5th when we go back to our hybrid model. But right now, that's the CDC guidelines, and that's the most that we can put on a bus, minus, of course, the fact that if it's a sibling, we can have more than one in a seat.
Rosemary Rutledge writes, can we do in-person OT, PT speech by making appointments and coming to the school?
I met with Dr. Kapler this morning, and that is a conversation we're having. If that is something, once again, I think the more we look at our peripheral programs and work at transitioning those smaller groups in first, that's going to definitely be a way to, as we start building capacity. My goal is obviously 100%. So I don't know if Dr. Kapler wants to chime in, but that is a conversation we had this morning. Can you unmute Dr. Kapler?
I should be unmuted.
You can't?
I can't find her.
She's over on the bottom right of my screen.
I'll look.
Okay.
I think I'm unmuted.
No, you're unmuted now, Dr. Kapler. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yes, we would like to start getting special ed students in for the related services, and that's going to be conversations with parents if they're willing to do that, and then how to work it out individually with the service providers.
Next question is David Greenberg writes, what happens when parents work until 4 p.m.? Do the children have to be present at, let's say, 9 a.m.? Can it be done when the parents get home?
Yes. As you know, one of the major guidance that came out this year that was different than the spring is mandatory daily attendance. But there's also flexibility on how that attendance can be tracked. So we're gonna look for different mechanisms for parents to log on that their child is present that day. But we're going to be very flexible with our assignment, our timing when assignments are due, and when assignments are going to be collected. I've already had one meeting with faculty already today, and they were very responsive, and that was one of their biggest concerns, was making sure that we have multiple ways for students to show attendance and to get their work in and be flexible on when those assignments are due. So I feel very confident that we're going to be able to make that happen. Once again, we're going to have a lot of support staff here, so please, if there's any concerns, if you feel like something's due, if you feel like you're not getting the support you need, please reach out to us. We are going to use all of our supports to make sure that our students, when we come back October 5th, have what they need both academically and socially.
Aaron Chappelle writes, for children whose guardians work, will it affect their grades to not be in virtual meetings and do their work in the evening? No,
it will not. The virtual meetings and the virtual setups, we have teachers that are going to set up, they're going to tape some of their classes, they're going to send assignments that are portfolio based and project based. not being able to log on will not affect grades. Once again, the biggest help to us, for us to help you, is that communication so that we know why your child is not on so that we can support them.
Thomas Fox writes, will parents and teachers have a way to monitor a child's progress on assignments, etc.?
Yes, at the high school, a lot of the teachers ask to use Schoology, which ties directly to our grade book. So we're going to make sure that parents are constantly in the loop with our teachers. We have a few parents that have actually volunteered starting at the end of August and into September to do parent training on Google Classroom. So yes, it's very important, and our teachers want our parents involved so that we can help support you so that we don't fall behind and we're continually closing those gaps.
Andrew writes, thank you, appreciate everything you're doing. Aaron Chappelle writes, for children whose guardians will affect their grades not to be virtual meetings and not do their work in the evening?
No.
Repeat question. All right, Naomi Gavner writes, what happens if your teachers have young children and can't return to work?
We're going to help support them to get daycare the same as we are for everybody else. This is the tricky part about not having 100% back in the building. This is the difficulty. We understand that for a lot of our people in our community, schools are also that safe haven during the day. So we're going to do everything we can to try to support staff is the same way as we're going to try to support all our community members.
Diane Lammers writes, what is the district's expectations for students who are in daycare and cannot participate in daily lessons? Will they be held back or not for not completing classwork?
No, we will. Once again, we're going to be very flexible on the classwork. Our staff knows that. And like I said, the teachers I met today, that was their biggest concern, is they wanted that flexibility to be able to meet the needs of students and move students along during this difficult time. And like I said, once again, we're going to continually work on those mechanisms to make sure we're getting that daily attendance.
Bonnie Jarman writes, what about students that don't have reliable internet services for online learning?
We'll do the same as we did last time. We'll generate hotspots on the school campuses, and we're also looking for hotspots that we can put out in the community.
Kevin Jordan writes, for parents who want to continue remote learning after October 5th, but do not have high-risk children or high-risk household members, will they be allowed to continue remote learning? Yes,
the form was put on the website today. We just asked that you fill that out and get back to us. It says a commitment to November. Obviously, we know things change and you may change your mind. I am very confident that come October, as we slowly transition back to in-person, it's going to be a very successful transition. But we are asking for that commitment because we want to make sure that we're balancing our class load to not only meet the needs of the students that choose to stay remote, but we want to make sure we're also offering the best high academic standards we can for our students that are in the building. And it's going to be very challenging for our staff. I have the utmost confidence that our staff is going to do an amazing job. But the more data we have to prepare ourselves when students start coming back in to make sure that our students that are remote have interaction with staff as well as the best possible academic environment for our students that are in person.
Ashley Campbell writes, will kindergartners need Chromebooks?
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Marilyn H. writes, will every student get a Chromebook or will it be one per family like it was in the spring?
We are going to start with, if you have, go ahead, Dan.
So this is where the survey was very important feedback for us. Right now, we believe we can provide one per student. So we are going to work on those plans. Once we are going to have people sign up again for the Chromebooks. If that number changes drastically, then we may have to limit it to one per 2 kids in a household.
They do mention they can use their own devices.
Right. The other part of it is, thank you for bringing that up, is that when we are in the building, we are going to open up a student network in the building so kids can bring their own devices back to school. So that should help as well. Sonia McClary writes, oh no, wait, that's just a general.
Is everybody in now, we think? Is there anybody in the waiting or is everybody in?
Mostly everybody. We have about 260 people and they're still coming and I'm still admitting.
But they're getting in when they ask, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Right. Wendy Hughes writes, what about pre-K program? Are they also doing remote learning?
As of right now, this is kind of a tricky subject only because we have not heard from the state about our grant. They will follow the same protocols and procedures as the district because it's our site. So if we're remote. They will be remote as soon as we transfer back into in-person. They will transfer back in. I think, Darlene, you're talking to them tomorrow or Friday,
Yes,
UPK?
yes.
Right.
Their plan when we were going to be hybrid was to come in 4 days a week. But now it's different, and we're still waiting to hear from the state. So we can't answer that one conclusively.
Naomi Gavner writes, are the teachers just using Google Classroom from their classroom? What's the difference between Google Class at home versus from the classroom?
I'll ask what they're going to use, and then maybe somebody else can explain more technically. For K-6, all teachers will be using Google Classroom. The feedback we got from parents was to make the teacher sites very similar, so it's easier for parents to navigate. So that's good with that. As far as the high school level, a lot of the high school teachers had started using Schoology, which allows the assignments and quizzes and everything to be built into that. It's a little bit more independent. Our high school students are more independent. So that's the only two platforms we're using going into the fall. That was one of the concerns that the parents had asked. If there's software that teachers are going to use as a resource, it'll be embedded into the student's classroom. Anybody need to add any more IT to that, or? Okay.
Christine Conti writes, how will remote learning take place be different for special education?
Our biggest concern is making sure we're meeting the needs of our special education students. So I met with our special ed director today, and now that we knew this decision was going to be made, once everything is set, we're going to start reaching out to those families. We're also going to make sure we have those supports in place for those students. And once again, as we transition, like I said previously, the groups that I'd like to start transitioning back in first are our students with disabilities, our students of English language learners, and our K-2 students. So that would be one of the groups we'd like to start transitioning back into school.
Cheryl Ferrandino writes, will all students be receiving a Chromebook to use, or will distribution be based on need like it was in the spring? So we would encourage people who have devices to use their own devices. If you need a device, though, we will provide one to you. Based on the number of requests that we get, it could be potentially one for each child in a household. If the number exceeds the amount we have on hand, then we will have to do maybe one per 2 households. We have placed an order for additional, but Chromebooks are one of the things that are also on back order. Julia writes, when will schedules come home? So schedules, right now, when we talk to the principals, the schedules will go out just as they normally would. It's usually that last week of summer that they get mailed out or released.
Which class? All classes will start online. High school, they will be live or in the same time frame as the regular schedule, periods 1 through 4 on Monday and Thursday, and periods 5 through 8 Tuesday and Friday. Elementary will be based on the teachers and the core teachers, the classes they teach. And go ahead. Oh, am I going too fast? All right. How does 100% remote meet the needs of our children? I agree. This is always one of those things. We know that the social emotional side of academics is just as important as the core content. That's why it's so important. If you have any concerns, we have our full staff of social workers, guidance counselors, and psychologists will also be here in the building. Please contact us if you need. If we need to do teleconferencing, if there's a way we can set up to do a one-on-one conference, if you actually need in-person counseling, once again, we're here to meet the needs of our family. So if you have a situation where you feel your child needs that one-on-one, please reach out to your building principal.
All right. Jody Nicholas Bodie writes, what is the criteria for actually opening October 5th? The back and forth is very difficult as a parent. Are there standards or numbers we can monitor so that we have an idea what to expect?
So the standards are the same as they were going in. My biggest concern is I probably spent the last 2 nights writing down all the negative and the positive impacts. And your question hits it right on. The back and forth is what we didn't want to do. We didn't want to open, find out that our protocols were written in paper, and then when it actually came to practice, or there was a boom due to Labor Day weekend and we were opening and closing and opening and closing. So I believe by doing this pause and starting 100% remote, because when you open a school year, it's going to be different, not only because of the fact of the new content and the new teaching platforms, but many of our high school hallways are going to be one way. We're changing the way parents are dropping their children off. We're changing the way students are getting off the buses. There's an awful lot of moving pieces, even when there's not students in the building. So I believe by giving us this 5 week of, let's start the educational piece, let's get our students online, let's get them learning, let's get the adults trained in what the hallways are gonna look like, what's our school gonna look like, what's our safety protocols, what we're gonna do. Then we can mesh both of those 5 weeks in when both of those things done separately have been perfected. I think trying to do both of those things the same time, bringing in a hybrid class with students we really don't know yet, still handing out Chromebooks, learning Google Classroom, using Schoology, I think we'd be setting ourselves up for failure. I would rather go slow and continue to go forward than force the issue on the 8th, and then we're out and maybe out for a long period of time. My goal is when we open is that we stay open and we continually increase enrollment.
Steve writes, will you please review the definitions of remote learning versus virtual learning?
Yes. Virtual learning is when we go to the hybrid model, or the mornings when your child is not getting synchronous learning, is where you're getting assignments from your teacher. So for instance, the teacher may have a video that you watch one day, and the virtual assignment is an interactive homework assignment or a reading assignment or revising a paper or a virtual lab. The remote day is our Wednesday. That's the day when we're not going to go with a traditional schedule, but we want the flexibility to meet the needs of our students and certain specific classes. So that Wednesday will allow teachers to do office hours. Maybe teachers want to meet with a small group of students and review things that they're struggling. Maybe, you know, if I was a teacher and I had a large group of students in a specific core, I would have all those students chime in and we could have a conversation, we could have a debate. So it gives us a lot more flexibility because we won't be locked into the schedule. The virtual day, when we come back to the hybrid, the teachers will be teaching the other half of their students.
Sarah Beals writes, will elementary school age children be expected to be online for 6 hours a day?
No. The reason why we did the AM, PM, 2 reasons. First of all, we didn't want the students in front of the computer all day. That was also brought out with we met with K-6 teachers today. So the other part of the day, they will be doing assignments, they will be doing activities. So there's absolutely no expectation of a student staying in front of the computer all day. That's even part of the reason why we did the period 1 through 4 on Monday, the period 5 through 8 on Tuesday, because we didn't even want our older students sitting in front of the computer all day. We want them to have an opportunity to have live classes, but also time to do their work and be students.
I'm still not clear on the reason behind K through 6 switching their synchronous asynchronous in the AM PM. Is there a reason it cannot be the same consistent schedule each day while we are on this remote schedule? Is it a bandwidth issue?
No, we have enough bandwidth. The issue is if we didn't want the situation where we had older children, and what was brought up to us from the parents was older children and younger children in the same household. So we also wanted to model the high school schedule. So if a student on Monday will actually be doing their same high school schedule, doing it from home, periods 1, 2, 3, or 4, which means those students, to the best of their ability, we want them in line with their teachers, interacting. The afternoon, it'll be very similar to what the elementary did in the spring with their Google Meets and their classrooms. And then we flipped it so that the high school students would then have their periods 5, 6, 7, 8 in the same order with their same teachers, because the teachers in the high school can teach up to 6 sections. And then in the alternating time in the AM is when the elementary students will have their live or their interactions with their teachers.
Meredith Connor Ellsworth, will the district mail out specific times and class schedules? When can we expect to receive this information?
Schedules will go out when they normally go out, but if it will help for us to post the time for when the synchronous and the asynchronous will be, that's a definitely thing we can put out there on the website.
Yeah. And just in our meeting today, our teachers, that was one of their concerns about when can we reach out to parents to try to provide training and getting to meet everybody. Mm-hmm. Teresa writes, is BOCES program still on?
As of right now, my conversation yesterday, they asked all of the superintendents to get back to them soon based on situations so that we can look forward. Like we said, I believe this is one of those perfect examples of a way for us to slowly transition back into an in-person school.
Aaron Davis writes, will Riccardi students in grades 3 through 6 have separate teachers for the core subjects, i.e. different teachers for ELA, math, science, and social studies, or will it be reduced to 1 to 2 teachers per grade?
Yeah, that's a building lot. I don't have that off the top of my head, but that's one we can write down and make sure we get that out to the person. Mhm. Can we highlight that so we know we want to answer it?
Yep.
Okay.
Next question is, how will science labs be taught?
So once we're back in person, they'll be taught traditionally. One of the state guidance was the fact that virtual labs during this time do count. I was a physics teacher for over 20 years, so obviously the ability to do hands-on is very important. So to start the year, science teachers are allowed to use virtual labs. And as much as I hate to say this, some of the virtual labs are actually pretty amazing. So that's how we'll start the year. But I'm sure our science teachers can't wait to get the students back into class to do some real hands-on learning.
Diane Lammers writes, how many minutes a day are elementary students expected to be participating in virtual and remote learning activities?
I'll get the exact time. The goal is for students not to be on the computer all day. When the state gave their guidance, they were very flexible in what we're allowed to do. There's not an expectation that a child is getting the traditional however minutes a day of actually in-person learning. So our goal is to make those activities interactive, experiential, portfolio and project-based, and not having students sitting in front of the computer.
Ms. Gumbel writes, when a person starts, if students bring in a personal Chromebook and something happens to it, who is responsible?
It's the family's responsibility, the same as like a cell phone or any other device that the student brings in.
Roger Jones writes, PE is mandatory for graduation. How will that be handled?
It's going to happen the same as all of our other core classes required for graduation, like algebra, science, social studies. It's going to have to be tracked, and they're going to have to participate, and there's going to have to be grades.
How is band going to be taught?
I'm not sure how it's going to start now that we have to start remote. I know in the spring that our music teachers did an amazing job, but I will talk to the music department chair, and we'll get that in. You can highlight that one as well, Dan, and get that information out to the parents that are involved in band.
All right. Now our next question is, my child receives extra math help in K through 6. How will this be handled to make sure she receives it? Last year, she only got 1 or 2 meetings when I specifically requested it.
So as I said before, we will have our RTI teachers and we will have our support staff in our buildings. So when we start the year, as you can imagine, one of the most important things we're going to try and do in September, which is going to be difficult, not being in person, is obviously our pre-assessments to find out the gaps from our students. As we know, there's always natural regression over the summer. But if you feel you need more help, reach out. That's why what's nice about having that Wednesday remote day where we have that flexibility. But once again, open communication. We're here to serve. Reach out to the building teacher, reach out to your student's homeroom teacher and say, listen, I think they're struggling. How can we get more support? How can we get more help?
Next question. If things go well with infection rates by October, is there a possibility that any sports will resume outside, i.e. volleyball?
We're actually waiting right now, believe it or not. There's a slim possibility that they're actually going to approve volunteer, non-required off-season workouts to start Monday, August 24th, as long as they're outside. I really hope that happens. We approved all of our extracurricular activities last night at the board meeting. We know how important these are for our students. I can't wait for our students to come back and be able to do all the things that students do.
Next question is, library resources and other lending materials, since you're sitting in front of bookshelves packed with info, will these be available for physical checkout? Google, and in my knowledge, can only go so far. We
do have what's the program?
So we are looking into purchasing different software that have books online, virtual books. So that's one resource. Students will also be able to pick up their textbooks and workbooks that they're going to need for a regular class. Library books is one of the things that we need to look into in terms of how do we sanitize them once they come back into the buildings. So we don't have an answer right now about library materials. Switching the AM/PM for K through 6 is going to be very challenging for parents trying to adjust their work schedule. Is this switching set in stone completely?
No. One of the things we can do is once we have our rosters, I can actually survey the teachers to see exactly how much overlap we think we may have between our K6 and our 712. Once again, I have the utmost confidence in our staff that are going to use that flexibility. You know, it may be something where we find out where we can have an AM meeting that doesn't have to be a PM, or maybe the teacher chooses to do an AM and a PM. I know in the spring, a lot of our elementary teachers did do that. They did a morning meeting and then they did another one in the afternoon. So it's not set in stone. We can look at the numbers once we get a little bit more solidified. And, you know, as you guys know, August is that month where we try to make, you know, the high school schedule fit. So it's not set in stone, and that's why we're having these meetings. And, you know, once we have everybody in the schedule, we can look at those.
Next is, did you say something about a form we can complete that indicates our post-October 5th schooling preference? Where is this located? There is a form. It is located on our COVID page of our website. We just ask that you complete it and then email it to the address. It's at survey@saugerties.k12.ny.us.
Okay.
The board spent extensive time coming up with a partial opening plan. Nothing has since changed with regards to COVID. Why has the plan changed? Seems like the board is read that.
Well, my concerns were, as I sat through the last couple of days, and like I said earlier, our goal is to open in such a way that we're opening safely, academically, and our students feeling comfortable in the surroundings. Bringing multiple things, including the academic piece, the new protocols, the safety procedures, mask, one-way hallways. I thought by bringing all of those pieces together without training, without timing, would only lead for us to take a step backwards. I think by doing it this way, with getting the academic piece set up remotely, building our capacity, finding out our gaps, finding out where our students are, and then allowing our staff to be in the buildings, get our protocols set up, make sure everything we have is running, everything is set. So when we mesh the students being in the building with all the COVID and all the protocols with the academic side of the house, we're going to move forward and transition in such a way that we don't want to close. The concern is if we can plan as one thing, implementing is a second piece. And we have to remember that a lot of our staff that are not here in the summer. I want things done right. I want things done slowly, and I want my students to be safe.
I think I would add too that because of the status of the pandemic, the school does not have the freedom that it traditionally has. We're under the guidance of the governor through his executive orders, and if a student were to be in the building and test positive, we're under the guidance of the Department of Health locally, which would impose and lead to the potential to shut down buildings or classrooms, or to have teachers out if a student were to test positive. So because of that, one of the difficulties to avoid disruption, the board met with the superintendent yesterday evening and discussed this, and decided to go with Mr. Reinhardt's recommendation for a smoother opening for those first 5 weeks.
I know things change daily, but if your intention is to return in October, aren't students returning at the very beginning of flu season? Or will that deadline be extended if need be?
I'm hoping that by then, with our protocols, I mean, one of the things that, as you know, we're going to have the screening in place. And you're right, but if the rates stay low and continually stay low, and I'm hoping that if there is an anomaly jump for Labor Day weekend, it goes back down where we are. But I believe if our protocols are set in place and we're doing our temperature checks, we are going to be able to open. If things do get worse and we have to extend it, at least we have everything in place in terms of the remote learning, the Chromebooks are out, our meal plan is set, and we're starting to meet those social emotional needs like a parent had asked earlier. So one of the advantages of being 100% remote is that we have all of our support staff up and ready to deal with any supports that our students and our families need.
Next question was just if they use a MacBook, and yes, you can use a MacBook as long as you can get on the Google platform.
Okay.
Will there be any Key Club activities outside of school?
I know Key Club is starting up. I will look into how that extends outside the classroom in the building because of COVID protocols. Go ahead, Dan.
So we did appoint advisors for various clubs. So we still do expect there to be clubs happening virtually to begin with. So like Key Club and stuff, they can potentially happen online. What provisions have been made for increased ventilations in the classrooms?
We are looking at new filters. I mean, we're not changing our entire system. The recommendation is windows open. We're going to allow students to take breaks. We're looking into getting tents so more students can have classes outside. So we're doing everything we can to make things as safe as possible and meet all of the guidance from the state.
When kids go back in person, how will you ensure social distancing when they are switching classes? in junior, senior high? Wouldn't it make more sense to group the kids and have the teachers travel to different classrooms?
We looked into both of those. First of all, one of the things we're going to do in the high school is, as you know, students will have their mask on. We're looking at staggering when students would move from one class to another. We're looking for as many one-way hallways as possible. We're also going to put lines down the middle so that when students do walk, they're not walking across. We looked into teachers moving, but as you know, at the high school level, students aren't grouped like they are at the elementary. A 10th grade, you can have two 10th grade students in one class together and not have another similar class the rest of the day. So we did look at that. And then, as you know, as students move up in higher classes, the materials you may need for an English Lit class are not going to be the same as the materials you would need for a chemistry class. So we did look into that. And when that can happen, maybe in 7th and 8th grade where there's teaming, but for a high school student due to scheduling, it's very difficult. We also are looking at the possibility of some of our classes when they change periods to can create more one-way hallways is for students to go out one door and enter another.
To follow up on social emotional needs, question, how do we help meet the needs of high schoolers for peer relationships?
That's a great question. I think that's one of the reasons why I was so happy that the board approved our extracurricular activities last night. Many of the advisors had already reached out to us, and we're hoping that we can get students to start signing up. We can start getting into our Google Meets, and maybe students who traditionally have not joined a club would now. And also, like I said, hopefully we'll get permission for the off-season workouts to start on the 24th as well.
How is it equitable for all students in the district if you're not providing internet and Chromebooks to all students? Hotspots are not going to do this.
Our goal is to make sure that students have internet and have Chromebooks if they need them. We can't put it, obviously we can't put it in somebody's house, but we're going to look in the community where it makes most sense to meet the needs of all students. And also in the spring, we did have student parents that did request things in hard copies, and we did make sure those students got those materials as well.
If in-classroom resumes, households may be reluctant to take the risk of sending in personal devices, loss, damage, privacy for household, non-encrypted, etc. How will it be handled to supply Chromebooks to those students that may not need a device at home, but will need one in class? We don't want to take one away from a child in need.
So what we'll do is, as that happens, when students start coming back in, we do have some older ones that that will be reconditioned, and we're going to leave those in the building. Believe it or not, some students may forget their stuff. So that's one way we can deal with that. And if a child has one at home and then they choose to come back in, we will continue to distribute them as long as we have them.
Will the elementary age children need to wear their mask at their desk? And if not, what's being done to protect them from air particles that may contain virus particles?
Our goal is that masks are worn all the time. We do encourage mask breaks, and we're hoping that mask breaks will be outside or in an area which is more ventilated. But we also don't want a child sitting all day with the mask on. And once again, I have the utmost faith in our faculty that will find those safe opportunities for children to take their mask off. And as you know, they can have them off when they're eating.
Will the workload be consistent from all classrooms? Back in the spring, it was a very heavy workload with no teacher support.
Thank you. One of the things we've worked on, and one of the things we came out today, is we're looking at a uniform lesson plan, K6, well, obviously not K, and we're looking at making sure that we not only have those vertical meetings, but while we're remote, we're going to make sure we have those horizontal meetings so the work is consistent, for instance, for all third graders across the district. So that was also brought up by the parent group. So yes, that's one of our concerns, is to make sure that the workload is consistent, and the workload is consistent with the expectations that are tied to the standards. So that's our main goal.
When they return to school, will students in the junior high and high school be with the same group of students throughout the day? And if so, are these cohorts being formed strategically by need, aptitude, or straight alphabetical?
The hybrid model is going to be set up alphabetically, because the main thing we have to do is we have to make sure that our class size is small enough that if the restrictions stay the same way they are from CDC, there's a limit on how many students we can fit into a class. Obviously, it's never going to be a perfect balance, because we never know where students are going to fall in certain classrooms. But the most important thing is to make sure that we meet the social distancing mandating and meet the needs of our students as far as the classes they'd like to take.
How will Superintendent's Day for staff be held?
Our first one is September 3rd. Teachers will be here, but our group meetings will be done virtual. There'll be time for students to do work. There will be meetings, but those meetings will virtual, and there's also requirements we need to do by state law as far as harassment training and need to know and other things, but they'll be done virtually.
If you have children in varying grades, the flip-flop in everyone's schedule is very confusing and impossible to do. My kids did well just doing their online work throughout the day. What is wrong with continuing this year's virtual learning the way it has done in the past?
Well, the biggest thing is going forward is the expectation is we're going to transition back into a traditional in-person day. We want our students used to that in-person learning, and there may be a case where that flexibility is needed, and that's why it's so important to have those conversations with your teacher and your building principal. But I think it's also very important for our students to get back into a quote-unquote normal academic day. My expectation is sooner rather than later, all of our students are back in school, and it's very important that we get used to that. This is academics, and now, as you know, especially for our older students, these grades are going to count, and these grades are going to be on their transcripts. So it's very important that we start setting the tone for academics and the importance of that.
Will there be any kind of kindergarten orientation since these students have not been in the building or met their teachers at all? How can they be expected to engage online in this situation?
We had a conversation with the elementary principals today, and they're brainstorming on a way, not only for kindergarten, but for other parents to find a way, even if it's virtual, to meet with their teachers the first time.
How are the new 7th graders being handled in regards to being a big change from elementary school?
Like I said earlier, Ginger Vale, the principal for 7th and 8th grade, she is working on ways of doing very small group in-person orientation, as well as virtual ones for parents who are choosing not to come in. I realize that's going to be a big change. So I think as we get closer to October 5th, we may want to look at what that in-person first couple of days may look like for our 7th graders.
Are you planning on everyone starting October 5th, or will there be a slow phased in based on special needs, grades, etc.? If phasing in, when can we expect all children to be hybrid?
I would actually like to start the phasing in before October 5th. Like I said, we're looking at our students with disabilities, our E&L students, and our K2 students. If things go really well, I would like to have us in the hybrid model that we had originally worked, that we're growing to by October 5th, and we'll start putting that information out.
When they go back to school, do the kids that have services, are they leaving the classrooms with the speech teacher, OT or PT, or are they doing it in the class?
I don't know if Lisa's not, is Lisa on? If not, I'll answer that. Okay. It depends on the situation. If the student needs those, I prefer they leave the room and go back. I know there's always a concern with the child that's in the hallway, but once a child's in the school, they have gone through the screening and the temperature check. So I would prefer they go to a room that we can sanitize when the student leaves.
I'm unmuted. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, the plan would be for them to go to the related services, and we would work with the service providers to make sure they had extra protection.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In the remote model, students are in classes every other day, and in the hybrid model, teachers will be teaching the same thing 2 days in a row to 2 different sets of students. Doesn't this mean that half the coursework will be covered?
Not exactly. What's going to happen, the days when the students are in person is when that direct instruction is going to take place, and on the virtual days is when the students will do homework, will revise. Are we going to get every single, the most important thing is when we look at our standards and we look at what we're doing this year, I agree. In the hybrid model, we have to make sure that we're being very specific and everything we're teaching is standards-based and is directly aligned with that curriculum. And as a former teacher, it's tough to not go off on tangents when a student says, what if and how come? And we know that's frustrating because a lot of times that's when the real learning takes place. It's going to be very challenging for our teachers, but I have confidence in what they're going to do. But it's going to be a very strict curriculum. And as we know, like I just said, not being able to go off on those what ifs is what's sometimes the most fun about teaching.
Are parents going to be notified of what learning programs the teachers are using? Will there be actual communication from the school about how things are going to be run?
Yes. As far as the overall framework for everything, we're using Google Classroom and Schoology and Google Classroom at the high school. We can put a list of the programs and the software that students will be using if parents would like to see them. And maybe we can also make that part of the parent group when the PTA parents are doing how to use Google Classroom. They can actually show a couple of the softwares that we have purchased this year for teachers and students to use.
8th graders are beginning foreign language. Are there any suggested programs that they may utilize to help introduce them, since it will be more challenging under the current circumstances, or should they wait and ask the teacher? This is one where when our foreign language teachers met at the end of last year, they had requested an extra meeting day. So that Wednesday would be a day where they would hope to have a third meeting with their students live. But once again, I would wait and ask the teacher too.
Yes.
For other supports.
But that was one of the groups that definitely had asked for time on Wednesday.
Okay. Are high school students going to get real grades and real lessons?
Yes.
Where will the Chromebook request forms be posted available? It'll be on the website. I will send a text blast out to everybody as we did last spring. Will teachers be accountable for school hours and not out of school? And are they going to actually teach lessons, not YouTube videos?
We are starting the school year with our traditional school day, where teachers are in the building, and they'll be teaching lessons. And my expectation is, I'm sure there's very good videos out there that they'll be intertwined into their curriculum.
If a teacher has a fever or tests positive and can't go to the building to teach remotely, will they just teach from home, or will they get a substitute like they would if they were in school?
It'd be great if they would have the ability to teach from home. That would be great, because that, once again, my biggest concern as we start rolling this out with so many variables is that continuity of learning. So if the teacher is able to teach from home, that would be great, because that would keep us moving in the same direction. It'd be very tough to have a sub come in, especially if it was just a remote setting.
Will the Boys and Girls Club be open during this time? Yes, they will be. We also have some other organizations in the community, that do provide daycare as well. We're looking to see if we can post a link to various providers, or at least access to it, to where to find those resources if people need it. Can we talk about BOCES special new visions?
That's a good question. That was one topic that didn't come up. I'm a big fan of New Visions from when I was a high school principal. I know one of the unique things about New Vision is some of the programs do go out in the community. So that's one that we'll definitely research. Thank you. I didn't think of that.
How is this going to affect my child's ability to get into college of their choice?
So, one of the things I taught juniors and seniors for a long time, the most important thing, as we know, when students look for college, is those teacher recommendations. So be in conversation with your teachers. If you're struggling, if something's happening, please reach out. If something doesn't seem right, please reach out to your building principal. We want our students to leave here and get into the college of their choice. That means we have to offer a rigorous curriculum, but it also means we have to do everything we can to support our students.
Have pods been considered to expand space, add classrooms in order to provide an opportunity for more children to be present at the same time?
We are looking into tents, which will give us more space. The biggest divider for us so far, and as everybody knows, is transportation. Even if a parent opts out of the transportation, we still have to keep that seat on the bus. I think we could make more spaces available within the building if need be. I'm hoping we can find different ways of increasing transportation. I think that's going to be one of the first component that's going to allow us to get more students back in school.
Will the cafeteria be doing bag lunches again during September? When the hybrid model starts, will students in the building be able to order lunch as normal and eat it in the cafeteria, or will it be in the classrooms?
So at the high school level, we spaced it out, and if you put a desk with 6 feet around it, if we use both sides of the cafeteria and half of the junior high gym, we can fit 256 desks, which is enough for every lunch period with half the students being here. We're starting the school year with a grab and go, because it's the least amount of interaction, the least amount of touching of anything. Obviously, our goal is for students to be able to pick their lunch. To start, the elementary students will be eating in their classrooms rather than have to go to a different space.
We will be providing lunches outside of school as we did in the spring.
Yes.
This time, though, there is no federal program to support us, so there will be the free or reduced or the cost for it. So we will have to get actual names on our list, and accounts will be charged. Sorry if I missed this, but will the school be providing masks, or are the children expected to bring it in with them?
We would like them to bring them with the school. We'll provide them. How will students actually, we actually had that conversation today with our elementary principals and Dr. Westinghouse. Our iReady does have diagnostic pre-assessments built into it. We are looking at how we would give those diagnostic materials and make sure the scores we're getting are valid. So one of the advantages of iReady is it does have the pathways. So that is one of our most important things as we come in. As you know, we're going to have students that, based on, for various scenarios, the gaps will be different for all students. So I think one of the most important things we do when we start school, and I agree in a remote, it's going to be more difficult, is to assess where students are. So we're challenging our students that had less of a regression, and we're making sure we're meeting the needs of our students that had gaps.
Can students with 2 essential working parents have an independent study plan to meet SED requirements in a way that works for the family?
Independent study at the high school level varies depending upon whether or not it's a core class and if and when it's a graduation requirement. If there's a concern about being an essential worker and needing flexibility, I think based on the fact that we'll have all of the work on a virtual platform, I would prefer reaching out to the building leader and the teachers and actually making a plan that best meets the needs of your family. Since everything is online, I would rather just use that and find a way for that to meet whatever happens in your house.
When they return, is it expected for special needs kids to wear a mask all day?
The expectation is all students wear a mask. If a student cannot wear a mask and has a doctor note or there's another situation, we ask that go through the PPS office.
How will teachers keep kindergartens socially distant and keep mask ons while ensuring the start of school is a positive experience for them?
That's a great question. We know it's going to be tricky. I have the pleasure every day of watching the kids from the camp walk behind my office. It's going to be challenging. We know that. And I think just as important as the social distancing and the mask, I think, is the personal hygiene. So I think when we combine all of those things, we do as much as we can to be creative with as many classes outside. So they're in fresh air, so there's less chance of cross-contamination, and still let children be children is our best way to go.
Another question about BOCES. Will they be going back at all, or will they be learning online?
As of right now, the latest conversation we had with BOCES, is there a way for our students that are in BOCES, especially the hands-on programs, and our students that are out of district, our students with special needs, to start attending BOCES? We have not heard from what BOCES is going to do yet. As of right now, they were still trying to keep the hands-on component. Our high school day was Wednesday, and they were doing everything they could do to run their full-time programs for students with disabilities.
Does a first grader need to bring in their own device for the days when they're in school in the hybrid model?
If we go to the hybrid model and a student has a device, we don't have enough for a student in class and a student at home, so they would need to bring it. I know it's a first grader. That's why we're looking at how many devices we can have of the ones that are reconditioned to keep in buildings for that case when a student can't bring it in.
Are temperature checks going to be done by the school? I felt if left up to the parents' discretion, those that will send their kids to school with a temperature because they had to work since a rapid increase of flu season.
We are looking at both models. Actually, we met with the elementary principals the other day, and we actually, that same concern came up, and we actually looked at what it would take and what would the procedure and what would the timing look like for students that are being dropped off from parents, being dropped off on the bus, socially distanced, getting their temperature checked, and then going to their first period class. So they actually had it down to exactly how many minutes they thought that would happen with 2 doors. So I think if that works out, we would do it right at the doors. We also are required to do periodic screening, and we were looking at an app for parents to do that.
Spectrum and other internet providers are only allowed to serve our areas through a franchise agreement that is signed annually with each town, village, or city. We should collaborate with our local governments, perhaps even on a countywide or statewide basis, to include wireless internet at our parks, pavilions, and other public spaces as a term of upcoming franchise agreements. I can't see the word. To help those who are in need by creating hotspots in public spaces. We rarely use our leverage in these franchise agreements. Now would be the time.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
What's the plan for a PE band course, art, foreign language remotely?
So if they're a high school, they're going to go their traditional schedule. So when those classes meet, what they look like, they're going to be different. I would ask the specific teacher. As you know, a lot of those are going to be challenging. but it'll be in their schedule. And like I said, if you want, we can post as we start getting closer, actually what those teachers think they can do to make those classes most engaging as possible.
I have a child that gave up on his remote learning through the Google Classroom by June 1st. With this in mind, he is already dreading the online learning. How can this be addressed in the solution if you have one for that situation?
I don't have a solution. I appreciate the fact that you did everything you could, and it got, I hate to say it, got as far as June 1st, hopefully with the start of a new year. And I think the difference is, one of the things that I think happened and hurt our momentum at the end of the school year is once we kind of knew we weren't coming back. I mean, I think any child naturally kind of felt like, okay, it's the end. I think now this is the beginning, and the expectation is that we're coming back in person. So hopefully that'll be at least enough of a motivation to kind of get things going, and then we can use what we have here with our teachers to keep that momentum going till they're in school.
I would add too that if a parent has a concern that their child is turned off to the learning experience for any reason, they're more than welcome to consult with our psychologists or social work staff to see if there are any issues or guidance that could be offered for why a child might be turned off to particular aspects of learning, or if anything else is going on that might be interfering. So I would hope that parents would avail themselves of that.
Yeah, that's a great point. If it's more than just they don't want to do it, and you think that maybe for some reason academics isn't meeting their need, please let us know.
When you have 3 children in 3 different grades, how could all my children attend their Google classes at the same time?
It's going to be difficult if you don't have it. Hopefully you'll have enough devices. If not, once again, this is where reaching out to the teacher and letting that teacher know, and that building principal. I have 3 children. I have one in grade 2, one in grade 4, and one in grade 5. It's going to be impossible for them to all be on the same schedule, to be on the computer at the same time. How do we make that work? I have the utmost confidence in our building principals that they're going to work with you and find a way to make that happen. The nice thing about us starting remote is everything we have will be on that platform for parents to go back and see what's there, see what their child is missing, and then how do we close those gaps.
In the spring, one teacher gave a big chunk of the grade to Google Meet, which was about 10 minutes. My child suffers from social anxiety, and showing her face on camera was very stressful. In the end, she was unable to attend the Google Meets. Will this be something the teachers will be doing this fall?
No, our expectation is we're looking at multiple measures to see how our students are learning and see how they've mastered those skills. So, once again, we're looking at project-based, we're looking at different type of assessments. It's going to be difficult because we won't be able to do some of the traditional ones we do in a classroom, like on-demand writing. But once again, if you feel that something's not right, if you feel like your child's not being assessed properly for what they're learning, please reach out to us.
Plus, there's a way on Google Meets to shut your video off so no one can see the child.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any information on students who need to take SATs or ACTs for college?
I have not heard when any of those dates have opened up. I know one of our teachers had already said they're looking for a spot that's not too far away. I'm actually waiting for an LSAT date for my son. But if we get that, we'll get that posted on the guidance website.
Since 7 through 12 students are able to stay home alone and K6 are too young, is it possible to use the high school to space out elementary students and have K6 learn live and 7-12 learn through virtual?
As you know, when we first started planning back in April, that was the original thought, was to try to expand K6, and if it took more space. The concern with that is that our high school students 7-12 would have actually no in-person learning at all. So when we looked at the pros and cons of both of those, of having a 7th and an 8th grader, 12th grader, like somebody had said earlier, they're trying to get their transcripts ready for college. I think education is valued to all students. We thought with this split here, at least we were providing 2 days of instruction to all students. And then with the hope that we could slowly start bringing in more students. Once again, the major groups that we want to bring in full-time more days are students with disabilities, our English language learners, and K2 then moving up.
My child also has asthma. Wearing a mask any longer than an hour causes him to have an asthma attack. What are the plans for students that have breathing issues with masks?
You have to bring a note to go in, and then the teacher will be made aware of that. We just have to make sure we're keeping things private, but make sure if it's a doctor's note that gets to our PPS director.
If parents or grandparents need support to help their kids with learning at home, are there resources available to help with that? Are there textbooks online or reference materials to help us reinforce lessons with kids?
Yes and yes. We are going to offer those parent nights, and if that's not enough, we'll offer more. We have some amazing teachers and some amazing parents in the community that are very tech savvy. So if we need to continue those nightly workshops, I think that would be great. And if we have to do them virtual, if we have to bring only 5 or 6 people spread out in the gym so that everybody's socially distanced, that's fine. I know when the Common Core first came out and I was a director, we ran 2 and 3 parent workshops all the time for parents to come in. So if that's something we need to do, we'll definitely do that.
Will there be a virtual learning only option after October 5th?
Yes.
What will be happening with the staff that are not needed during the remote phase in September and likely beyond? Will this be a cost saver to the taxpayer?
I'm not sure of any staff that we won't be using. All teachers will be assigned their typical load due to the fact that the expectation is that we're bringing everybody back, and even the students that are remote still have to be assigned to a teacher for grading purposes. All of our support staff, my expectation is that they're kind of molding what they're doing to meet the needs of our parents that are remote. So if I'm a social worker, my expectation is they're reaching out to those families, they're reaching out to those students, finding ways to help meet the needs. So I'm not sure what staff would be accessed.
What sort of PD will teachers receive on effective small group learning online?
Dr. Westinghouse?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Actually, I'm in the midst of preparing a workshop for teachers on all of the elements of online learning, and small group being one of them. So I will be offering it as professional development for my teachers to sign on.
So another question about schedules. They will be distributed as normal. I'm sorry if there's a repeat. When students return to in-person, will they be required to wear a mask all day? I thought it would only be when departing classroom and in the hallways.
The expectation and the recommendation is that students have masks on. They can be taken off during instruction and taken off when they eat. We're also want to make sure we give opportunity for mask breaks.
Will kids be expected to visibly be present in attendance for Google Meets to incur a routine expectation to be ready, dressed, and prepared for the day?
That's our goal. One of the things we're working on right now, and I'm glad you brought this up, is a document to help students be prepared for remote learning. As you know, even when they go on to college, a lot of colleges now, students have an option for remote learning. So we are going to set that out. What is the expectation is it when you're in a remote class? Now, obviously, there's the traditional things that if you say something or you do something inappropriate, it's as if you did it in school. But I agree 100%. I mean, one of the goals and the reasons why we set up the remote model of the high school periods 1 through 4 and 5 through 8 is we want to start getting students used to being back to that traditional schedule, meeting, being prepared, being in a good mindset, and be actively engaged in the learning. Now, we know there's going to be situations where we need to be flexible due to certain situations within the family, but our expectation is they're in front of the computer, they're as if they were a student, and they're ready to go.
We had a couple questions about what's the plan for pre-K. If you could just revisit that.
Yeah, with pre-K right now, we haven't heard anything back from the state. Our UPK is a grant. So we're still waiting to hear. We're still doing enrollment and everything. And if we go to our hybrid model, they were planning on 4 days a week. If we're remote, they can't start. But once again, we're waiting to hear from the state for funding on that.
The little ones are going to be coming to school with masks that have designs on them. With that, they are going to want to trade masks with others because they like them. Is there going to be a plan where the school requires a certain mask so that other students don't have the urge to trade them?
I mean, I don't know. That's a tough one because when I'm out and about and I see little kids with really cool masks on, it's like I really can't get mad at them. But I understand that, and maybe that's one of those things where it's going to be difficult because children always want to share. So that's going to be a tough one when they want to share parts of their lunch or they want to show somebody a pencil or so. You know, that's a tough one because we know how important it is to be genuine and caring to other people.
Many of these kids are very good at collaborating online for social purposes. Is there an opportunity to set up some sort of remote tutoring program where older students might be able to help younger students with their remote assignments?
That's a great idea. And I know Key Club and I know some organizations actually have community service. My only concern, we just got to make sure in terms of, I hate to say this, but there's the liability issue if it's through our network and something negative happens. But I think the idea of small group tutoring and small group work through Google Meets is a great idea. So thank you.
Just a general question about all these questions being posted. I have no internet at home and I keep losing service. Would like to know questions and answers. We are recording this and we would like to post the recording. When we find out which days the school will be, when we find out which days we would be in school during the hybrid model, parents would need adequate time to find proper daycare on the days they are not in school.
So we looked at the split, and mathematically, believe it or not, A through K and L through Z was a better split than A through L. So the split will be AK will be Monday and Thursday, and Tuesday and Friday will be M through Z. Those days will not change, even though the 6-day cycle for attendance purposes will. We didn't want parents to have to follow the ABC schedule. So if your child is AK, and when we start the hybrid model, you would be Monday and Thursday. If your child is MZ, they will be Tuesday and Friday. Now, we understand that there will be some changing of that due to multiple siblings in a household, and we always know there's going to be situations that we're going to have to address, but we're starting with that through our transportation. That looks like it's going to work. And then obviously with siblings in the same household and other situations.
As a grandparent who will be maintaining this remote learning for 4 kids in grades 3, 5, 7, and 9, are we going to get a syllabus or some similar communication to facilitate our ability to manage their learning efficiently? In the spring, this was not clear and frequently changed.
Yes, one of our goals is to make everything much clearer, much consistent, so that if you have a child in multiple grades, you know what the expectations are for every grade level. And we're getting as granular as actually specific, so the websites look the same. So if your child is in first grade, you go to that website, it'll look the same, and then you'll find your class under that, and you'll find your specials. So that's heard loud and clear, and that came out with our parent meetings.
Are there certain types of masks that would be approved versus not approved? Do they have to be of a certain style or quality?
I think cloth masks are fine.
Yeah, we're going to follow the CDC guidance. If we choose to keep our child remote learning after October 5th, would the child continue to follow the same remote schedule being issued now? How will this work when teachers are also teaching in person on given days? So
when we go back to the hybrid model, your child will have a slot in one of those cohorts. So when we go to the hybrid model, there'll be 2 in-person days, 2 virtual days, and 1 remote day. What we're looking at is a way for 2 Google Meets for the children that choose to be 100% remote, so that on the in-person days when their children are not here, they have an opportunity to touch base with those teachers. Another opportunity that we're looking at is if there's a situation where we also may have a staff member that is not coming to work, and if the certifications align, we may be able to combine those students with those teachers with those certifications to make sure that there's live interaction on the in-person days when they choose to be remote.
When they return, are the classrooms going to be wiped down after each period?
The recommendation is as often as possible. So in the high school, as you know, periods are used multiple times. So there will be wipes in the room. We cannot require or ask students to wipe their desk. We have had teachers that said that they will. We're looking at if we have enough desks and we have a room that has to be used 2 periods in a row, to actually have desks that are for odd periods and even periods, so that children won't sit in a desk that somebody sat in the period previously. We're also looking at every alternate space, so there's less opportunities for a class to be in the same room twice. And once a class is not being used, that master schedule is going to be given to our maintenance, so that they can be cleaned anytime a room is not being used. And we're also looking at how we're scheduling our maintenance to have more maintenance during the day, because we'll start the year with less activities at night. So we're looking at more of a flex schedule.
When is the expected decision date going to be made for October 5th?
My goal is I'm going to look at the data and see where we are as far as implementation of our protocols and practicing our protocols and where we are with our platforms. I would like to at least have an idea of how things are going by that second Friday in September. If things are going well, in the county, the numbers are staying, I feel confident in what we've practiced and what we've rehearsed and our communication to our parents. That's when I'm going to start looking at that data. I'm not going to wait till October.
Would it make more sense to have A through K on Monday, Tuesday, and LZ on Thursday and Friday to limit cross-contamination?
Thank you. That question came up as well. The concern with that is the buildings will be cleaned, deep cleaned and disinfected every single day. The concern is they come in Monday and Tuesday, they will not have any type of interaction with a teacher possibly to the following Monday. And if there's any type of a holiday or snow day, that could be almost a week between interaction or lessons. By going with Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, and the remote day on Wednesday, we're reassuring that if a child is struggling with a certain content, they're not frustrating or not being able to move forward for up to 5 days. So that's why we did look at that. We looked at 2 days in a row and then the remote. We felt educationally the best decision was Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday.
Will junior, senior high students be socially distant to use lockers, lunch?
We'll start the school year with no locker use. Lunch, yes, they'll be socially distanced. We're taking the tables out and there will be desks and the desks will be 6 feet apart. We've already measured both cafeterias and part of the junior high gym.
Will high school students receive real grades, not what happened Q4? Will there be live virtual teaching, not YouTube videos?
Yes, there will be live teaching and there will be real grades.
Are teachers able to live stream classes for children that remain remote after the hybrid model begins?
We're working on that right now. The biggest thing we want to make sure is privacy and the expectations of both the students and the classroom.
How are households with working parents supposed to afford daycare? Will there be a reduction in our school taxes so families can afford daycare?
That's out of my control. I apologize.
Another question about schedules. How will we be able to obtain our class schedule? And will there be guidance counselors available by phone to make any class changes if necessary?
Yes, when do guidance counselors start back?
They're 2 weeks before the beginning of school, so August 24th.
August 24th, they'll be in the building to make assignments.
On snow days, instead of canceling school, can the school switch to a remote learning for the day?
That's a good question. My concern is the safety of the roads of having staff come in. That would be my biggest concern. How will lunch be served?
Yeah, how will lunch be served? Will there be any after-school buses?
Lunch will be served. Lunch will be grab and go to start in bags the same way we delivered meals in the spring. We're starting the school year with no after-school buses. And then once again, that's going to be one of the things we transition as things go well, as we know our bus routes. Right now, we want to make sure we have enough buses based on social distancing to make sure we can get all of our students in at least 2 days a week. A lot of our buses make multiple runs.
Has New York State come out with any Regents information? I know it's a long-term issue, but does the state seem like they will be lenient for state tests?
They haven't come out anything for January or June yet. We went to a meeting I believe it was last February, where they asked school board members, teachers, and superintendents and administrators to look at other ways for students to show mastery of content without the state test. I believe we're moving that way. The state has increased more pathways and more ways for students to get credit for Regents exams that are not the typical Regents exam.
Who's going to provide daycare and support for young students whose parents need to work?
We can't provide it, but we are looking for community partners and make sure we get that information out to our parents.
Another question about BOCES. What does this mean for BOCES?
As of right now, we believe BOCES is still going to be in person for the hands-on and for the out-of-district placements. We're going to find out soon. We would like to send our BOCES students there on Wednesday.
Another question in reference to 7th graders. What will be done to help 7th graders when the transition back to school happens, since they have not been to school yet?
Ginger Vale, our 7th and 8th grade principal, is looking at doing some small group in-person orientation and some virtual orientations, and maybe we can find a way to do a similar transition as we get closer to October 5th.
What about those children who don't have home internet?
We're looking at hotspots, and if that doesn't work and the students need the work provided in hard copies, let us know. We had a couple families that was the case in the spring.
Teacher goes from home. Answer that. Okay. If remote goes well and then classrooms open up again, will any thought be given to considering a 2-day alternating classroom virtual and 3 days remote? I am pleased to hear that a second day is being considered for support to remote once hybrid schedules open, but wondering if it can go a step further. Also, will the phone system for alerts resume, including a robotic call to draw people's attention to items such as these surveys and town meetings? Some people don't have smartphones or Facebook and may be missing this info. You're all handles, you're in a compliment.
So what was the first, I missed the, so when we go to hybrid, we're gonna have 2 in-person days, 2 virtual days, and 1 remote. And it's families that are 100% remote. Our teachers are looking at a way of providing a Google Classroom to touch base and provide that information and that in touch on the students that are home. I'm not sure what the suggestion was, I'm sorry.
So Richard, again, if remote goes well and then classrooms open up again, will any thought be given to considering a 2-day alternating classroom virtual and 3 days remote? Yeah, so I mean, I think that is, if I'm understanding correctly, that sounds like that is our hybrid plan where their students will be in the buildings 2 days and then virtual/remote for the other 3.
Yes.
I think we're speaking the same language. Will teachers also be allowed to bring in their own Chromebooks and have access to hotspots or Wi-Fi network?
Yes, if we have the bandwidth, we want to also open up an opportunity for staff to get onto the network as well, because once again, that'll free up more computers for our students. And also, as we start growing and getting back to 100% students in the building, we're going to be using every possible teacher space. So a teacher that may have an opportunity to be not in their classroom but still check their email and do their work, we definitely want to provide staff with that opportunity.
With multiple children and multiple grades, I found it hard to stay on top of making sure my children completed all assignments on time. Can the teachers send emails to parents if a child is falling behind?
Yes, we can work. And we also, one of the teachers today brought up a software that they had heard of, which allows them to actually send notices to parents through a text, because a lot of parents were saying it was difficult to check their own email during the day. So we're checking on that software as well.
How will the nurse's office work for children who are healthy but getting medicine or just a scraped knee versus a sick child to keep them separate?
If anything that we believe may be a COVID, we have to have an isolation room, which is different than a student or a child that is sent to the nurse for like an injury or something that you had described above.
I'm confused about the answers given about wearing masks. Is it all day or can they take them off during instruction?
They can take them off during instruction. Once again, it's up to the teacher, but we are reminding our teachers about mask breaks, especially if they're outside. And at any time there's a mask break, there has to be social distancing.
Will school start end times be different when we go to the hybrid schedule?
No, the expectation is that everything stays the same. There's a slight change in schedule, but that had nothing to do with COVID. As you know, we approved a new schedule for next year. It's an 8-period day with a wave lunch. That will allow our students with special needs opportunity for more support. And it also allows all of our students more electives, and it guarantees more students an opportunity for at least one study hall for the opportunity to get work done during the day. So that adjustment to the schedule is a few minutes at the end of the day, but that was done prior to this. Our expectation is that we're working with our traditional schedule so that when we transition back into in-person, it's easier for families and students.
So just to clarify, the high school day is going to go till 2:18. Elementary school days will be 8 minutes longer.
Mm-hmm.
How do parents who are essential workers pay for childcare for multiple kids that don't qualify for government assistance?
I'm sorry, I wish I could help, but I can't.
How do you know when we as parents will know if a child is getting their own Chromebook? That was honestly the hardest part. So once again, based on the survey results, we think we should be pretty close. In the coming days, you will get an actual sign-up sheet like we had last time. At that time, we'll be able to know specifically, if we can provide one to everybody. As we said earlier, we have purchased more. We're waiting for them to come in. Will the isolation room be negative pressure? No.
I thought it was like a classroom pressure thing.
On days with inclement weather, what outlets will the students receive to exercise some of their pent-up energy they are dealing with, since they will remain in their classrooms?
The goal is to be outside as much as possible. As I said, we've reached out to see the opportunity of get some tents. The state has actually given districts an opportunity to put in those permits for tents as long as it's less than 180 days. So we're looking forward to that. And like I said, all of our building leaders and teachers have asked for the flexibility to be outside as much as they can. So we're excited about that. I think our teachers are going to do a great job of, sticking to the content, but also giving our students an opportunity to be outside.
Prior to COVID, grades 4 through 6 often switched to other classrooms for certain subjects. For example, in a grade level that had 2 teachers, one teacher would focus on math and science, the other would focus on ELA and social studies. Will this continue? If so, once in the building, how will this be handled so that changing rooms is done safely?
If it's in place, it will continue, but the teachers will move. It's a little easier in the elementary because the students are all in the same grade level. They'll also be pushing in for specials, but they're also looking for ways for the specials to be outside so students aren't in the same room all day.
If a child or teacher is immunocompromised, will they be held responsible for missing school or work because their doctor advises them to stay in quarantine?
That's a
Yeah. I'll just speak to a child, right? So if a child gets a doctor's note saying that they're immunocompromised, they cannot come to school, we will provide the work remotely.
Yeah.
What if you do not have enough Chromebooks for all students? If that is the case and we're not able to get them in time, then we will have to do some kind of priority, whether it be one per 2 kids in the household, or based on grades and grade level and needs. Suggestions. Some of your high school teachers used the Remind app last spring, and that worked well to keep parents informed about assignments that were due. Also, how would I find out about what kind of help you might want from parent volunteers?
So I think for parent volunteers, I think the best thing to do is go through your specific building PTA. And I really appreciate the parents that want to help. I can't say enough about the parents that were on our reopening task force. We had 2 or 3 parents that told me early on that their children would not be returning to school, but they continue to come to the meetings and still help us work on solutions to bring students back into the building. That's a pretty amazing, unselfish thing to do, to give up your free time to help other students. So it's been very impressive. So anybody who wants to help, but go through the PTA, especially with the school year starting, and they'll best know how to help everybody. As far as the Remind app, that's
just
a B thing, right?
Yeah, so New York State enacted new requirements in terms of data privacy, and so with the Remind app, trying to work with them to see if they would sign off on our agreement. Right now they are not willing to sign off on it, so we are looking at other options. We'll be able to use the pavilions at Cantine Fields.
We thought about that. I can't imagine them ever saying no. They've done so much for us. The tricky part is the distance based on the high school periods. That's why we were looking at the tents here on site, because we could, I hate to say it, as a former high school principal, you're always thinking about safety. So if our students are leaving the building, I would prefer they be close enough that if they have to get back in, as you know, we have swipes at our doors so that our parents can get our teachers can get our students right back in the building quickly.
Will parents be given daily reports of some kind indicating what their students are responsible for, what's due and when, and what child has completed handed in? In March through June, I had no way of knowing unless I reached out or viewed my kid's Google Classroom as my child. I would receive a Google Classroom report a week after the fact. Parents were very left out, especially with older kids in the junior high school.
Okay, I think that's a good point. That was actually brought up with our parent meetings. I know for one of our elementary teachers said there's actually a way for parents' email to be attached to their child's assignments. They can't do the assignments, but they can see it. But we hear you loud and clear, and that's definitely something we have to make sure we do a better job of this fall, of making so parents know all the time their status of where their children are.
In previous years, it was a security issue to have students outside because of school shootings, etc. Now we are encouraging classes to be outside. So are we focusing on students coming back or students being safe from school violence as well as COVID?
Yeah, I agree. And that's why when we look at what these safety protocols are going to be, that's one of the reasons why, the canteen, the pavilions, we're looking at, if we do have kids right now that go out for recess, there's always eyes on, there's always a door right there. We have all of our doors right now have codes and we have cameras. But I agree. And that's why I made my previous statement of formerly being a high school principal. You constantly, I hate to say it, you constantly think about safety regardless of what it is.
I think I have read through all the comments. If you think I missed a comment, please put it in the chat now. Or if you want to ask any follow-up questions, you may ask them now as well. How will students be graded during this time?
They will be graded by our traditional grading, but we understand that there's going to be situations where flexibility is going to be needed. So, please, once again, the most important thing, and even if this wasn't COVID, the most important thing, and I always tell students, own your education. So please, if something doesn't seem right, pick up the phone, send an email, send a text, find out what's going on. I know for a fact that our staff and our teachers are here to support you. So if something doesn't seem right, please let somebody know.
How are fire drills and other drills going to be handled?
The one good thing is if we run a fire drill, obviously we're going to maintain social distancing. Teachers are going to know, students will have their mask. Once again, if it's a real fire, so we will have to practice our fire drills the way we do normally. By definition, direct contact is more than 10 minutes when you cannot have a mask and maintain social distancing. Luckily, all of our fire drills are less than that time. So fire drills still have to be maintained. We still have to practice those. There are suggestions, for instance, on how we do our hold in place and lockdowns. The recommendation is if it's a drill, you don't have the students clustered in one spot. You keep them socially distanced, but you explain to them the purpose of the drill and why you're doing the drill. So a few of the drills are changed a little bit, but we still have to maintain and do all of our practices.
Can I call BOCES to ask for info regarding New Vision's attendance? If I understand you correctly, my student will be attending BOCES on Wednesdays.
You can, if not, now that somebody brought the New Visions question out, I'm going to reach out myself and find out that information so all of our guidance counselors have that.
Can you talk about the protocol for using the shared bathrooms in elementary level once school opens?
The expectation is that all bathrooms are cleaned regularly during the day. We can't guarantee that they will be cleaned after every time a student goes in them. We are putting in different paper towel holders. Believe it or not, we're not using the air ones. We're using the ones where the towel is already partway out. And we are definitely going to increase cleaning throughout our buildings all day long. That's part of the reason why we're flexing our maintenance staff, because we won't have as many night events.
Cahill has a small outdoor area. Is the cow flop going to be used to allow more classes to go out?
That's a question for Dawn. If it can be done safely and students are safe, that's my biggest thing. I don't know if that's been, I apologize, I don't know if that's been used in the past during the school day.
We used to use it for phys ed. Okay.
When Dan was here, he used it for phys ed.
Just a comment here. We appreciate all your efforts and understanding this very difficult time, and we also see that your priority is to get the kids back in school full time. I must comment that my concern is the mental well-being is just as important as the COVID virus. I
agree, and as we have conversations with staff, we are definitely building the social emotional component into everything we do. I mean, we agree 100% that when students come back, there may be trauma, there may be things that happen at home, there may be things that happen to a family member. We have students that for the first time may walk into a building and see everybody with masks on, gowns, shields. So all of that's going to be new for our students, and it's very important that we constantly look to meet the needs of our students academically and social emotionally.
How will breakfast be handled when students return to school?
I think breakfast is going to be grab and go as well, Dan.
Yeah, so at the elementary levels, when the kids walk into the building, there will be staff there handing those students breakfast as they come into the building. At the high school, we will have some form of grab and go as well. Question just says transportation question mark.
Thank you. Right now, the transportation is going, looks like it's going to work with the amount of routes we have and the amount of buses we have with the CDC guideline of 1 student per seat, alternating seats with a mask on. If we go with the A through K, L through Z, you know, once again, parents have been amazing. I've had so many parents contact me, say, if it'll help, I'll drive my kids, I'll drive my neighbor's kids. We appreciate the effort, but we are required to have a seat for any child who may need it. So once again, a lot of what we're trying to do to get more students in definitely revolves around transportation. So, you know, not only are we monitoring all the CDC guidelines and recommendations while they're in school, but we're also monitoring those for transportation, because as those guidelines change, that'll also allow us to get more students in the building.
One of my children is going into 7th grade. Last year, she received a lot of extra help due to her IEP. How will the school be helping the children who need additional help?
Excellent. So when I met today with the elementary principals and we met with some of the K-6 teachers, as you know, we will have all staff in the building. So we will have our RTI teachers, we will have our TAs, and we will have our special ed teachers. So that's going to allow us those opportunities for those breakout groups. So for instance, you know, a child may have an IEP that the test is red. You know, that's an opportunity for that to happen, and maybe extended time. So, you know, we will have all of our resources to make sure we're doing everything we can to meet all the needs of our students. So if a student needs enrichment, we want to make sure they're getting enrichment. If a student needs reteach, we want to make sure they're getting reteach.
Parents wanted to clarify that they're going to 7th grade this year. So there's going to be similar supports at the high school.
Yep.
We're going to have our TAs or aides still on staff to provide those necessary supports, and always encourage you to reach out to your child's teachers. Question was, my child had a one-to-one all day. How will that work remote?
That'll be a case-by-case basis. I think the best way to get an answer would be reach out to our PPS director and see how we can meet the needs of your child.
Will seniors that elect to do all online be allowed to participate in graduation?
Yes. Is that it?
That is it.
Oh, thank you. So it's 8:17 and 28 seconds. I want to thank everybody. How many people?
Question here, sorry.
Dan, you said we were done.
The district asked for transportation info in September. I can't get to the question now. All right. What if a parent's work schedule changes? In previous years, we weren't allowed to change transportation info. Will there be an option to change throughout the school year? Instead of being a walker, now they will have to be a busser.
At any time, we have an obligation to meet the needs of our families. Just please give us as much head. If you know something may be coming or there's something we can do to help, please let us know.
Who's going to provide daycare and support for young students whose parents need to work?
We're going to reach out to our community partners and see what we can do to help families.
If I homeschool my high schooler, will their math, science, and language count towards requirements without a regent?
Homeschooling, if your goal is to get a high school diploma, it's different than a regular when you're homeschooling. So if you're choosing to make that decision, you need to contact central office, because if the expectation is to get high school credit, the curriculum and the content has to be turned in ahead of time for prior approval. And then if the expectation is to take a Regents exam, that has to be turned in. If it's just for high school credit, it still has to be approved by central office prior to starting the course. And then you have to show us that the work's been completed. and the mastery and the proficiency.
All right.
Yes, we'll post I'm sure I'm sure the building principals had that, but we'll make sure the PTA information gets out there.
Okay.
How many do we have?
How many what?
People.
On right now?
Yeah.
167.
So we had 167 people on, and we had
We had over 200 at points.
over 200 at one point. So I really want to thank everybody. Once again, the community has been amazing since last July. This has been challenging, but you know, we have no other choice but to do what's best for our children, and I think we're doing that. I know people aren't happy with the way we decided to start with our remote first and build toward our hybrid. Children's safety will always be the most important thing on my mind, and making sure we're preparing our students. But once again, I can't thank everyone enough for all their efforts. Our next forum will be next Thursday at 10 o'clock. And next Thursday night at 6:30. There was going to be one tomorrow night, but we moved it to Thursday during the day because we had parents who worked at night. And we hit 260 something.
Yeah, 265, they said. There was a question just about the passcode. Make sure that when you do click the link next time, you want to be admitted as a guest. I will take a screenshot of the screen and post that on the website, so there's no limit confusion. All right.
Is that it?
I think so.
I don't know, Dan. All right, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. And, you know, if you have any other further, we'll post this. We're recording this, right?
Yes.
So we'll post this, and we can also keep the questions.
Yeah.
Then we'll have another one, 2 more next week.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.